Hello, bruvs. We're back with Laura Mundo's Belmont, a fictional, more like a historical novel. Finally, Ma found an advertisement in the want ad column of the Boston Sunday Globe under female that said, housekeeper wanted, someone who wants a good home more than high wages. Ma really wanted and needed both, but she was in no position to dicker. The farm that needed the housekeeper on it was down Maine. Seth Jones, the farmer, in Belmont, answered Ma's letter to his ad and hired her. And I should note that I do know some of these names of the characters involved, and I probably should do a explication of that and what's that called when you what's that called, annotated version of this, but probably won't. We'll see. It was like being on a frightening merry-go-round that I had ridden on at a carnival one time, without the calliope music, of course, and the gaily painted horses with poles in the middles of them that went up and down in time to the happy music. We would soon leave by the Bangor and Aroostook train. Farmer Seth Jones would send our one-way tickets. Mr. Jones must be a trusting man, Ma said, as if she weren't stepping out into the unknown also, and taking her little family with her. Aunt Flo whispered to my oldest sister, Abby, and shook her head sadly. We had gone down Maine the first time on the Bangor Aroostook train and came back on it also. It was the only way to go, unless you went by horse and buggy, and that would take ages. And we didn't have a horse and buggy. You could go by overnight boat from Boston to Belfast, Maine, near Belmont, but that was expensive, and Farmer Jones wouldn't send that much money. Some jitney lines, taxis were available, but not commercial bus lines, and airplanes, though invented to use in World War I, had not gone commercial yet either. We were presently staying with Aunt Flo. She didn't seem to get nervous with my two brothers and three sisters and Ma and me around, although she had three small boys of her own, Rob and Roy, about my age, and the baby, Jeremiah, whom Aunt Flo wouldn't let us call Jerry for short because it is a Bible name. The more the merrier, Aunt Flo would say, her hazel eyes sparkling, waving her chubby arms about in the air to include their big, old, rambling, weather-beaten, shingled, three-storied house on Melbourne Street in Dorchester. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. It's probably Dooster. Part of Boston. Her husband, Tom, who never disagreed with her, Ma said, would smile and nod his head and promptly disappear upstairs in the direction of the den that Aunt Flo had fixed up for him on the third floor so he could get some peace and quiet. As nice as Aunt Flo was, she herself seldom smiled. She had a dry New England sense of humor, Ma said. That meant she would sometimes be joshing us when she didn't sound that way at all, and without a smile it was hard to know when she was joking. She feels the joke inside, Ma told us, not on the outside like most people. I was from New England also, I questioned in my mind, as I sometimes did grown-ups' explanations of things. I laughed inside and outside, both at jokes I thought funny. Ma said, and that was in parentheses, so I believe that was when she was a child, which is insane to put this in a book, but here we go. Ma said Aunt Flo was a friend to all the world. In that case, I thought to myself, and I sometimes also kept my ideas to myself, until I had thought them all out in my mind, she should have been called Little Kim. That must be an inside joke. I was an avid reader of everything in sight and had been since the age of 3, with 2 older brothers and 3 older sisters who couldn't teach me fast enough. My older brother, Jed, in particular, who Ma said was a natural teacher. I would skim through books I didn't understand also, taking out the few parts that I did understand, or newspaper headlines or signs on buildings when I would walk by them, or ride on the elevated railway. I was presently at the breakfast table at Aunt Flo's reading the print on the back of a new box of dry cereal called Post Toasties, where the man who made it said how good it was for you. You could buy it in the store all prepared now and not have to cook cereal for breakfast, like oatmeal or corn, mush, because Ma said they are cheap and nourishing. Post Toasties cost more, so we didn't have it at home. Aunt Flo and Uncle Tom had more money than we did, but not much more. I couldn't see why we couldn't have it too. I had skimmed through a book of Rudyard Kipling's writings once, the English writer. That was how I knew about the meaning of the name Kim, and there's our answer to little Kim. He was a little native boy in India who used to bring the British soldiers drinking water when they were sent there to live with their guns by the English Queen, or maybe it was Gunga Din. I read so much and so fast once I learned how, even before I went to school, I sometimes got things mixed up. Especially history. I refused to learn dates. I disliked them. For some reason, I would always say that something happened before something else happened or after something else happened. Of course, when I began school, I had to learn dates or to better discipline my mind. The book by Rudyard Kipling was only one of the many nicely bound books my real father, Papa de Granada, had brought from his dormitory room in college when he and my mother eloped and got married. That meant I knew without their parents' permission. I couldn't imagine being your own boss to that degree. My violet-eyed, soft brown-haired, tiny, sweet mother, Emily, although she seemed big to me, of course, was divorced from my natural father before I really got acquainted with him. His name was Alfonso Jaime, pronounced Jaime, de Granada III, whom Mom called Elf at times when she was angry with him, and Elfie when she wasn't, my sisters told me. Some of the kids on the block, my sister said, would call Papa Jaime, the key, when he would walk past them. I am Spanish American, first generation, he would answer them, with his dark eyes flashing proudly. One can almost hear him clicking his heels, flamenco style, as he answered them back, arms flung high, snapping his fingers. He was always impeccably dressed. That meant neatly, even in his once fashioned clothes, and carried a cane swagger stick that he waved at his tormentors. If he had been drinking, if he hadn't, he would simply doff his hat at them gallantly and pass silently on, which wasn't very often, my sister said. Papa was part Irish also, which he never mentioned. That meant we were also, as well as part Spanish from his side of the family. I heard some of the kids on the block say we were as well, bloody Catholics and dirty Protestants at our house. We were really a polyglot of people. Polyglot was a word I had found in the dictionary and liked. It sounded like the word pollywog. I have only a fuzzy recollection of my father. He left when I was about 3 years old. I remember him as being tall to me and slim, delicately boned, dapper with dark curly hair to match his black eyes. He had a thin black mustache that curled upwards in a circle at both ends in reverse of each other that he kept waxed and which fascinated me, my sister said. I was always trying to pull it off. I remember Pa's black eyes smiled more than his lips did. I don't know how much is my sister's and brother's description of him, of course. My older brother Jed had already graduated from grammar school and knew more big words than I did. He said our father had been a very articulate man. That meant he could speak very well. My older sister, Abby, who didn't have fond memories of Papa, said he had a gift of gab. My father liked to read also, they said. I am told he would perch me on his knee when I was age 1 and 2 and read to me out of the classics, Homer's Odyssey or Virgil's Aeneid. Aeneid? I don't know how you even say that, even though I've known the word for decades, with 2 front capital letters, so I might obtain, he hoped, a classical education by osmosis. I hadn't yet found the word osmosis in the dictionary. I hoped it wasn't something for which I would be sorry after I got grown up. In the Odyssey, Homer, a Greek man, and I don't know why you would put this in the this book, but took a trip a long time ago, it seems, and came back and told the people in Greece about it and about the people he met, some of them with only one eye in the middle of their foreheads, the Cyclops, which some grown-ups said was only symbolism for people of great wisdom, or the third eye, or single eye. Virgil, in the Aeneid, told the Greek people about the sky people who traveled in clouds. And here we go, this is why. And spoke to him from way up high in the sky. They were called gods by the earth people, although they didn't call themselves gods, only more advanced human beings, as I remember it, or thought of it from more advanced planets. Occasionally, I got them mixed up in the telling, too. It didn't really matter, I thought. Both men had died a long time ago. Aunt Flo constantly told me when she would visit and always find me reading, I swear, Lottie, you were born with a book in your hand. When I was about 6, I had a vague notion about the birth process, that babies were made in mothers' tummies and came out through a special opening, my sisters told me. If I had a book in my hand at the time, I thought it must have been painful for my mother. I was inclined to take things literally until life's experiences taught me that words and phrases often have two and even more meanings. As smart as I heard people tell me I was, there were some things about which I was absolutely uninformed. I decided at that time, but never mentioned it to anyone else, of course. There were apparently lots of things left for me to learn. I would always go to school, I decided, all my life. I love to learn. My parents' divorce came after 20 years of childbearing on the part of my mother and 20 years of alcoholism on the part of my father, and his alibis denying this was the case. This is the part where I don't understand, because I'm pretty sure I have photos of her with her father when she was 20, so, and then she mentions right here that they were married for 20 years, so that's right, she was born way after most of them, so maybe she was rather young. That's true. I think she was 10 to 15 years younger than the rest of her siblings, well, at least some of them. Your father, Aunt Flo would tell us when my mother wasn't around, was the original alibi Ike. Papa, Aunt Flo told my sisters, drank prior to Prohibition, whatever that was, and during it, Uncle Tom wondered where he got the money for the booze, let alone the booze itself. But my sisters said they knew he had begun pawning his things, and then Ma's to get drinking money. First, it was the beautiful black onyx and silver cufflinks with a diamond in the center of each side that his parents had given to him when he was graduated from Dover Academy. Then the green jade necklace he gave to Ma when they were married. It was from his father's mother's, Inez, his Spanish grandmother, who told him when she slipped it to him in a pretty gray velvet box, "This is for your little bride, whom I shall never live to see." She was quite old at the time. Ma had had one child each year for 6 years, one right after another. After the marriage, my sisters said, first the dead baby, then Jed, Abigail, Abby, Obadiah, Obi, Matilda, and Priscilla, Prissy. Then 8 years later, I had been born, so it was 10 years. There was a dead baby born after me, also, both of which were unnamed. The first one died, my sisters told me, because it was too large for Ma. My sisters called her Mama when they were little, but changed it to Ma, so that was why I called her Ma also. They were bitter about Papa's drinking. We don't want Ma's name to rhyme with his, they told me. The first dead unnamed baby had weighed 10 pounds, they said, and Ma's pelvic bones were narrow. It was in the days before cesarean operations, although Julius Caesar's mother had had him by having the doctor cut open her stomach and take him out, I discovered in an encyclopedia later after they told me. That is why the operation was named after him. It had been forgotten by medical science in the meantime. The doctor had to take Ma's first dead baby out in pieces by forceps, whatever they were. My sisters told me when I was about 6 in a low voice for fear Ma would hear them as we sprawled on their bedroom cots with the door open. They were a veritable fount of information. It's a wonder they didn't scare me to death. My only saving grace was that I didn't understand all that they were saying, fortunately, but never let on. Ma would tell Papa to get out of the house over and over. Through the years, when he would come home drunk, they said, or tell him, go see a priest or a doctor, Alf, and get yourself straightened up. He would try, they said, but it would do no good. He would only get drunker and took to drinking anything after a while. Ma's cooking vanilla and men's shaving lotion, bay rum, even Ma's furniture polish. Then Papa would sober up for a while and come back with his Latin charm, my sisters called it, or charisma, as it would be called today, and say he was sorry, and Ma would take him back again and get pregnant all over again. It was in the days before public birth control, although some people had ideas on birth control privately. Margaret Sanger, the tireless social worker, although she came from a wealthy family, had not yet been thrown in jail for teaching Planned Parenthood. The law was under the influence of the churches that were against it, my sister said. The churches did nothing about the money system that made some people rich and kept some people poor and babies starving. They taught that one must be strong-willed instead and not have marital relations often, whatever they were. And I will make a note about the money system, which she will talk frequently about but not really get into. But I assume it's the fiat money, but which most central banks are involved in. But then she also believes that, and don't quote me on this, but in more of like a communist society, as in what's the one called in Israel? Hold on, I have it on my desk. It's the kibbutz. I don't know. I actually found this book not long after reading about that, and I picked it up. I never read it, but she talks about the kibbutz, whatever it's called, but she calls it by a different name. So she's she's against the money system, but then she's for basically giving the money away. But like I said, this is a novel, and so who knows what's what. Where did we go? Let me find where I left off. All right. Something was very wrong. I thought Ma worked hard, but she never had enough money to feed and clothe us and herself properly. While some people didn't work at all and had all the money they wanted given to them. Sometimes Aunt Flo would send over hot dishes left over from their supper. They lived only a few blocks away in Dorchester. The churches that we attended sent boxes of fruit and a chicken to roast at Christmas time. But of course, we had to eat all the year round. Some rich kids, my sister told me, didn't have to clean up their plates at dinner time, as Ma always made us do when there was anything left. And some people were bored with eating and had a hard time making up their minds what to order when they went out to elegant restaurants to dine. I couldn't imagine what that was like. I was always just a little bit hungry, but Ma said that was because my legs were hollow and she could never get them filled up. My legs weren't really hollow, of course. Ma was only teasing me. And only those people with extra money, which we never seemed to have, could buy those funny little white rubber bags, my sisters said, that American doughboys had brought back from Paris after the World War I. They were called French safes or prophylactics and were sold under the counter of the drugstores called condoms today and sold under the counter only in some states like California. Despite the endemic spread of venereal disease, in some states like Michigan still make the public distribution of birth control literature illegal. The men who make the laws in those states, my sisters told me, are trying to regiment the love life of their people. They're as bad as the churches, they informed me. I thought that churches were good. And Papa de Granada would have worn a rubber. If Papa de Granada would have worn a rubber, which I couldn't visualize him doing at age 6 because I didn't know where he would wear it or what they look like. Things might have been different, my sister said. Rubbers to me were something you wore on your feet when it rained. But Papa was a Catholic, and his church wouldn't even let him pull out when he went off. When he and Ma had a party, my sisters told me, taking it for granted that I understood, and shaking their 13, 14, 15-year-old heads sadly, like Aunt Flo. And Ma, apparently, they had decided on their own, didn't know about douching after a party, with something called Lysol, a disinfectant that killed living sperm, they said. She didn't even own a douche, whatever that was. Or if she did, they informed me, she kept it hidden. Perhaps they should tell her you could buy one in a drugstore, as pharmacies were now called. They would wonder over and over amongst themselves, but they never did. They didn't want Ma to know that they knew about them. And I think I'll stop at 20 minutes, just because. Why not? All right, bros. That's all. Goodbye for now.